To see Rimi. Oh, did I pick a bad spot to end it last time? I might have done that. Oh god. I'm assuming he's like, that's why I'm going to school. I tried to pick a good ending spot. Apparently I failed that mission. I was sure my Dukyun classmates would be making fun of me again. It hurt, but I'd be willing to put up with it if it meant possibly seeing Rimi again. As I walked through the school gate, I remembered my conversation with Senna yesterday. Before we departed ways, Senna said one last thing to me.
お前が望むと望まないとにかかわらず、もしこれ以上踏み込んでくるようなら、負を正にするぐらいの強い意識を持つんだな。中途半端な気持ちじゃ、妄想に食われるだけだぞ。
I didn't want to get involved with anything dangerous, so I didn't ask anything more. I knew I wasn't going to get the D-sword anyway, no matter how hard I tried. I wasn't a hero. I was just a loser who couldn't even protect his own little sister. But there was a chance that Shogun would come back. He seemed to be coming after me as part of some sort of game, which meant the next quest might start whenever he felt like it. That scared me. The only reason I'd wanted a D-sword in the first place was because I was so scared of him. How was I supposed to protect myself from him without the sword? Have Rimi stay with me? But Rimi wasn't coming to school, and that worried me. What if he took Rimi hostage like he did Nanami? Wasn't there anybody who could help me? It would have to be somebody who had a D-sword. Ayase was injured, so she was out of the question. And there was no way Senna was going to help me. And Kozupi was a little, no, very strange. I entered the classroom with my head down. I took a single look around the room before I sat down. First at Rimi's seat. Empty. Was she absent again today? Or was she really just not coming to school, or was something more going on? I wanted to see her again, to see her cheerful face once more. Next, Kozupi. She was sitting in her seat, looking down, making herself as small as possible. I remember what Senna had said yesterday, which more than explained why she acted that way. Morning, Kozupi. We didn't look at each other, but we exchanged our greetings in our mind. The Dokyun girls were grinning at me. It had only been a day. The label of creepy loser otaku who made a mess on TV wasn't coming off that quickly. The Dokyun boys evidently weren't here yet. Those guys would often skip first period. That was more than fine by me. I sat down. And then I heard her voice as it called my name.
Taku, ohayo.
Alright, wait, no. Hooray for... I don't know if that's hooray. I gasped and looked up. Rimi was standing in front of me. She gave me a little grin and a wave.
久しぶり.
Rimi.
I wasn't imagining her. She was really here. She was breathing. Her hair bounced gently as she moved. She blinked every so often. She was really here. She was here. I felt the need to sniffle coming on. My heart felt like someone was squeezing on it hard. I felt like I was about to cry. I lifted myself up out of my chair, but then stopped, unable to move. I'm so glad I got to see you again.
ちょっとタク、どうしたの？ もしかして泣いてるの？
I shook my head as hard as I could. If my Dukun classmates saw me crying, they'd make fun of me again. I told myself that I couldn't cry, but the tears just kept coming.
わかった。私に再会できて嬉しいんだ。そうでしょ。なんてね。ちょっと自意識過剰だったかな。
All I could do was keep shaking my head. I couldn't even look up at her. If I did, I'd start sobbing right on the spot. Then someone slapped me on the back.
Oh, Taku.
Well, look who came crawling back. It was Misumi with an awkward expression on his face. He hadn't slapped me nearly as hard as he used to. Just yesterday, he'd been ignoring me. Why was he talking to me again? If he did, it would ruin his life. The Dokuns in class would bully him. That's right, both Rimi and Misumi would be better off if they didn't talk to me at all. When I didn't respond, Misumi forced a smile into his face.
暗いな。朝から新規臭いぜ。ま、お前はそういうやつだって分かってるけどな。
He was being as rude as ever, but it didn't feel like he was being mean. That was just how he always talked.
そういう大臣は朝から無駄に爽やかだね。
無駄にとか言うな。久々に学校来たと思ったらいきなりそれか？
じゃあ嘘くさい爽やかさ。
なたく、この言い草どう思うよ。
I gave him a vague nod. I'd managed somehow to stop the tears. Life was back to normal, at least in terms of what was in front of me right now. The two of them didn't seem to be bothered at all by the fact that they might end up bullied by the rest of the class.
そういえば、岸本のことを聞いたか？まだ入院中らしいぜ。怪我は大したことなかったんだけど、精神的にかなり参ってるらしい。いいか、タク。女を落とすのに一番手っ取り早いのは、弱ってる時に優しくしてやることだ。
This guy's the worst.
というわけで俺、本気で岸本の見舞いに行こうかなと思ってんだよね。
This guy sucks so hard, dude.
大臣最低。ブーブー。
Oh man. Seconded.
今度こそ
Or I
彼
guess
女さん
she
に刺さ
seconded
れ
it.
るの？
Whatever.
お見舞いに行くだけだろ。別にやましいことじゃねえよ。
ほんの数秒前と言ってることが違うし。
そういえばタクって岸本と知り合いだったよな。な、一緒に行ってくんね？
That sounded like something Misumi would usually say. I was sure he was going to ask me about my supposed psychic powers, so I was actually kind of surprised. He kept talking a while after that. Misumi would talk, and sometimes Rimi would make smart comments, and I'd just kind of nod along. It was the same as it had been before. And that made me happy. Oh. Oh, good. That face. Genichi Norose stood in front of the window of in the CEO's office on the top floor of Nozomi Group building and lit his cigarette. The Nozomi Group, a massive corporate group with tight ties to the government and any number of smaller companies beneath it. Some of these child companies had begun in fields like clothing, foodstuffs, and imports, and gone on to achieve remarkable success. Norose was at the head of the group, and here he was in his castle, looking down at the scenery below him. But his mind was somewhere else, instead of enjoying the view. There was a mocking smile on his lips, but his feet were tapping impatiently on the floor.
まったく。老人たちの相手は面倒ですよ。そう思いませんか？彼らは臆病すぎる。だからこそここまでのし上がってきたとも言えるのでしょうが、利用するにも こうあれこれと横槍を入れられてはいい加減うんざりしてきますよ。現実は悲しいかな。300人委員会の影響力というものを侮ることはできません。ただいずれ近いうちにそのシステムも崩壊する。世界の支配構造は組み替えられる。楽しみですか？私もですよ。ここまで随分時間がかかってしまいました。
I can't tell if he's talking to himself or if he's talking to somebody. And like,
プロジェクト
he seems
の
like the type who would just talk to himself like this.
立ち上げからすでに5年余り。
Norose walked over to his desk. It was a heavy desk made of natural oak with very little on top of it. The few things that were there were business related. There was, however, one object lying on its corner that was very different from the others. Norose picked up the strange green character. He gave it a disinterested glance and tossed it into the wastebasket. Green character?
さ
His narrowed eyes were turned toward the dimly lit room. The moonlight from the window didn't reach to the far end. There was a faint sense, however, that someone was present there.
まさか君がギガロマニアックスだとは思いもよりませんでした。どうやら神すらも私の味方をしてくれているようだ。君のサンプルを取らせてもらいますよ。何？怯える必要はありません。私は元医師でしてね。インフォームのコンセントはきちんとしなければ気が済まないたちなのです。そもそもノア2のハードウェアはすでに完成しています。あと必要なのはソフトウェアの方でしてね。そのために君たちギガロマニアックスのサンプルが多く必要なのです。正確に言うならば NA シナプスに関するコードサンプル、脳の働きに指令を出す役割を果たしている部位の行動サンプルですよ。コードサンプルには個人差があります。持っている能力が高いギガロマニアックスは NA シナプスもより活性化し、脳のより広い範囲にわたって効果を及ぼします。人間の脳は全体の10分の1しか使われていません。しかしギガロマニアックスは違う。残りの10分の9の部位も使っていることが分かっています。ギガロマニアックスの頭の中というのは実に興味深い。そのサンプルがノア2にとっていわば CPU の役割を果たすわけです。サンプルが多ければ多いほどノア2の能力は本物のギガロマニアックスに近づき、やがて超えるでしょう。納得してもらえましたか？結構。
Norose nodded, satisfied, and let out a puff of cigarette smoke as he turned back toward the window. Seen up close, Shibuya was a vulgar, disgusting city. Looking at it only brought him displeasure. But high up here, he always found it a more pleasant sight. Of course, it wouldn't be long before he'd never see it again, after his group's Project Noah performed its last experiment.
世界が生まれ変わる日も近い。
That doesn't sound good. I see. Lunchtime. I always skipped lunch. I hated eating by myself in the classroom. I didn't have anybody to eat with. Lately, Rimi had tried inviting me to eat with her, but I was always too embarrassed to say yes. Whenever lunchtime came around, I would always leave the class and escape somewhere more peaceful. Sometimes that would be the library, sometimes the courtyard. But ever since what happened at Ofrent, the whole school knew my face. There was no place left where I could relax. I could feel them staring at me. I could hear their laughter and insults. Like I did every other day, I walked around the whole school, and found no escape from them anywhere. Just when I was thinking of hiding in the toilet, I saw Nanami walking away from me, down the hallway to the first-year student classrooms. She was walking back to class alone, it looked like. I realized I hadn't talked to her once since the incident. I'd been avoiding her for the past week. I mean, I'd have no idea what to say when I met her. I was a terrible brother. I'd chosen to save my life instead of saving hers. It was nothing more than a miracle that Nanami had been released. I'd done nothing at all. Maybe Shogun had told Nanami that it was my fault she'd been kidnapped. If so, she'd definitely be mad at me. She might hate me now, and not want to speak with me at all. I didn't have the courage to go talk to her. But after I'd happened to see her, I'd started to get worried, even though it was way too late. Had they done anything to her? Had they hurt her? Was she okay mentally? Not expecting that. For a moment, the memories of that hand came back to me, but I shook my head. The severed hand, the bangle on the wrist, the phone, they were all a delusion, a very realistic delusion. I knew this for a fact because the hand had disappeared from my fridge. Instead of assuming that it had disappeared, it was more natural to assume that it had never been there in the first place. Especially since Nanami was alive and here at school. I started to run after her without even realizing I was doing it. She was getting closer. Nanami hadn't noticed me yet. As she walked, she played with her hair with her right hand. I went to call out to her. As she played with her hair, the sleeve around her right hand fell back a little. God. I gulped back my words. What the hell awaits? Oh no. Okay. It could be a coincidence, we don't know. I stopped. They'd seen something. Something very small, almost unnoticeable, but something white. Something wrapped. Placed so it wouldn't stand out. A bandage. On her right wrist. It could be completely unrelated, you know? Okay. Chapter 8. Let's say IR. I already forgot what it said. Bon arrived at Frisia 30 minutes after the time Momose asked him to be there. Momose yelled at him as soon as he arrived. Bon shrugged and gave her a half-hearted smile as he walked over to her desk. He hadn't brought her any sweets today, a decision he was beginning to regret.
あら、つばちゃんは？
今日は別行動。
若い子をこき使ってバンちゃんは楽してるわけね。
いやいや、俺もちゃんとやってるよ。昨日だって徹夜でいろいろ調べてたんだぜ。おかげで最近の女子高生の生態についてはかなり詳しくなった。
あんたね、呆れて物も言えないわ。
で、こうして俺を呼びつけたってことは、あの子と連絡取れたってこと？
今来てるわ。
さすがももちゃん。あ、ちなみに可愛い子かい
？Momose gave the grinning Bon a slap on the head. She put her wrist into it too, and it hurt pretty bad.
いつまでもバカなこと言ってんじゃないわよ、エロ親父。
冗談だって。
Bon had asked Momose for a favor. He'd wanted to talk to somebody involved in the New Gen cases directly, and had asked Frisia to make it happen. His questions were, for the moment, not going to be directly linked to the police investigation. He couldn't talk to her in an official capacity, at least not without getting... At least without somehow getting the rest of the team involved. Who would that be? Like, my mind is running back through the cases, and I'm trying to think who the... I guess I should just continue. Momose headed for a corner of the office, motioning for Bon to follow her. There was a small space there, surrounded by shelves lined with files. This space served as a meeting room for talking with clients. There were 2 sofas, each with room for 2 people, and both far too big for the cramped little area. When Bon followed Momose inside, he saw a girl sitting there. She was wearing a Suime Academy uniform. Her shoulders were slumped and she was looking down. She looked exhausted.
ごめんね。お待たせしちゃって。
The girl looked up in surprise as Momose spoke. Her glasses slid on her nose a little, forcing her to push them back up in place with her fingers. Yeah, we haven't heard from her for a while. I've had a feeling it would be her.
あ、いえ、平気です。
I don't remember her name. I feel terrible. I'm terrible with names. She looked a little scared as she bowed shallowly to Bon. He was kind of hurt by this. Bon always tried his hardest to try and come off as unthreatening. He realized, though, that he must still be giving off the intimidating air of a professional police officer, though. It's something he would have to keep working on, he realized.
楠木優愛さん
That's right.
だね。
はい。
亡くなったミヤさんの双子の姉。それで間違いないかな。
Yua flinched a little before nodding. The first new gen case was the group dive. One of the victims who jumped was a girl named Mia Kusunoki. Oh.
まあ、そんな緊張しなさんな。
I don't know if I was already supposed to know that and forgot, but damn.
君を取り調べようなんて思っ
I
ちゃねえ
didn't
んだ。
remember that.
雑談程度に思ってよ。本題に入る前にちょっと聞いていいかい？ゆあちゃんは妹さんが亡くなったことについてどう思う？
ちょっとバンちゃん。
あ、悪いね。職業病ってやつか。気を使うような言い方できなくってな。ただ気になってたんだ。捜査本部でも話題になってたんだが、楠木美也さんの遺族は奇妙だって。
ばあちゃん。
いえ、いいんです。
Momose had almost leapt out of her chair at Bon's rude question, but Yua herself stopped her.
私もおかしいって思いますから。
ああ。
集団ライブで飛び降りた5人には自殺する理由なんてなかった。家族や友人はみんなそう主張している。だがミヤさんの家族だけは違った。
Bon took his fan out of his belt and began to wave it at his face.
何も主張しなかった。あっさり受け入れたって聞いてる。あまりに何も言わなさすぎて奇妙だったってな。なんでだい？
お父さんもお母さんもミヤちゃんが死んでからおかしくなっちゃったんです。
There was pain in her voice.
最初はミヤちゃんの事件の知らせを受けた日はそれでも泣いていたんです。お父さんもお母さんもとても辛そうでした。でも次の日の朝、なぜか二人は楽しそうに笑っていたんです。ミヤちゃんが死ぬ前と全く同じに戻ってたんです。たった一日で。私、わけがわからなくて、二人はミヤちゃんのこと忘れようとしてるんじゃないかって思って。そうしたらお父さんが笑いながら、お前に妹なんていないよって。ミヤちゃんが残した洋服とか靴とかを見せても全然取り合ってくれないんです。それはお前のために予備で買ってあったものだって。そうやってお父さんたちはニュースからも警察の話からも目を背けて、記憶からミヤちゃんのことを消し去ろうとしてるんです。
つまり双子じゃなかったことに。
それで警察にもうちは一人っ子だって言って追い返してたわけか。
私とミヤちゃんは一卵性で見た目は瓜二つなんですけど、あの子は、妹は親から嫌われていました。あの子はいつも自分の気持ちを押し殺して私のことを一番に考えてくれていたんです。
As Yua talked, she remembered her old life. For example, one year when she was in elementary school, her parents had bought a present, a single giant stuffed bear. Yua was excited, but Mia said she didn't like stuffed animals and ignored it. Her parents had disliked how Mia refused to act like a little child should. Still, Yua had quietly offered to share the stuffed animal with her, but Mia had refused. "I don't need a stuffed animal. You can have it," which was all she said. A month or so later, though, when Yua had gotten tired of the stuffed animal, she'd woken late at night to see something surprising. Mia was holding the stuffed bear and talking to it, with such a happy look on her face. Yua had never seen her sister look so happy. It was only then that Yua realized her sister was lying about not wanting the bear. She'd been lying so that her sister could have it all to herself. Oh man, this is gonna make me cry. Stop. Nope. Oh man, that hit me really hard for some reason. I don't know why. I'm okay. The next day, Yua looked under Mia's pillow and found a cute picture of a bear she'd drawn. Mia had been sleeping with it in her arms until Yua got tired of the stuffed animal. Oh my god. Am I just a baby? Am I just a... Oh, that's not fair. Things like that had happened over and over again for the past 18 years. It was always Yua who blew out the candles on the birthday cake. Mia would say, "That's stupid, I'm not doing it," and her parents would get angry. Yua had made it into Suime Academy, a private school, but Mia had deliberately behaved badly in class, lowering her grades and making sure she got sent to a public one. Her parents hadn't the money to send both of them to private schools. No matter what Yua tried to do for Mia, Mia would always put her sister first, even if it meant making other people hate her.
私は結局ミヤちゃんの優しさに甘えて今まで自分だけいい思いをしてきました。
I don't know why that bear shit got me so bad, but it really did.
ミヤちゃんがいなくなって初めてもっとあの子のために何かできることがあったはずだってすごく後悔して私が代わりに死んであげればよかった。しかも挙句に親に存在そのものを忘れられてしまうなんてこんなのあんまりです。あんまりにも悲しいです。
That was all the talking she could do. She took off her glasses and put her hands over her eyes as she began to cry. Momose sat next to her, kindly patting her on the back.
それでユアちゃんは一人で事件のことを調べていたらしいの。ミヤちゃんに一体何があったのか知るためにね。
そりゃ大変だったろう。
そして一人の人物を突き止めた。
あ？
Momose looked over to Bon, still holding Yua close.
西條匠くんよ。
なるほどね。
Bon stroked the stubble on his chin and leaned forward.
いつだったか西条と追跡劇をしてたっていう女子高生の話を所轄のデカから聞いたんだが、もしかしてユアちゃんだったりする？
She nodded at him apologetically.
ああ、興味あるな。詳しく聞かせてもおうと思ったけどちょっとごめんよ。
Bon chuckled and bobbed his head at Yua and Momose. He'd been cut off by the sound of his phone ringing from within his suit pocket. He quickly took it out and looked at the LCD screen. It was showing Sua's name.
もしもし、どうした？
先輩、7番目っす。
なんだと？
Here we go. What nightmare fuel awaits me? Sua's voice was tense. Bon could hear the sound of other police officers frantically running toward him. From the sound of it, Sua was at the station.
入 ジェネ第7の事件が起きたんすよ。
Bond's eyes went wide, and then he bit his lip bitterly. Momose and Yua could tell by his demeanor that something had happened, and were looking at him worried.
ガイシャは3人友人同士らしいっす。3人とも胴体から体が切断されてて。
In half, like that. I don't even know if I want to know.
それぞれの上半身と下半身を別々に入れ替えて手ぐす
Long
釣りとっ
ways.
すね。それで縫い付けられてます。
Oh God.
それと額にそれぞれ Q、D、N って読める傷が。
That's vile. These are
何か
brutal.
のメッセージか。
Pregnant Man still wins, but I wonder what the name of this one's gonna be.
さあそこまでは。それと気になることが。司法解剖の結果は分かったんですけど、ガイシャの胴体の切断部はノコギリとか包丁とかそういう刃物で切断されたものじゃないって。
Oh God, were they like pulled apart or something like that?
どういう意味だ。
なんか強い力で引きちぎられたそうっす。
引きちぎられた。
Bond repeated that to himself as he scratched his head roughly with the hilt of the fan.
まるで怪獣だな。あるいは最近流行りの魔法使いとかな。
What?
先輩、それマジで言ってんすか？映画オタクの自分でもさすがにその意見には同意しかねるっす。
単なる例えだ、バカな。映画ら、さっさと捜査に戻れ。
He hung up the phone. Jesus. The sun started setting earlier once November came. By the time I was ready to go home with Remy after class, a pale orange color was settling over the sky.
ごめんね。
Remy had been silent until then, but suddenly she apologized.
たく、いろいろ大変だったんでしょ。
It was the first time in a while we'd gone home together. I was so happy she'd come back. She'd offered to go home with me again today, for one thing. We'd only gone home together twice now, so I was afraid she might want to stop, but that didn't happen.
一緒にいてあげられなくてごめん。知り合いが例の地震で怪我しちゃって、ずっと面倒見てたから。
Remy brought up the subject, even though I hadn't asked. But to be honest, I wasn't even hearing most of what she was saying. That bandage I'd seen on Nanami's wrist at lunch. I couldn't get it out of my mind.
もしかして怒ってる？
I'd missed my chance to talk to her then. Well, no, I'd gotten scared. Nanami was my little sister. I was her big brother. But something felt so strange. The nurse had said Nanami wasn't hurt. The hand that Shogun had sent me had disappeared from the fridge in the base. It was all supposed to be a delusion. So why would she have a bandage around her right hand? I mean, it's not like he took the hand and put it back on. That's not how... I mean, at this point, I guess I shouldn't try to apply logic. This is madness. Maybe I was just overthinking things, and she'd gotten burnt or had a nasty bug bite. That had to be it. Right? That was the most sensible answer, right? But I was still afraid of finding out. I hadn't been able to help her, but here I was, too gloomy to even talk to her. I was a really awful big brother.
ねえタク、おーい、もしもーし。怒ってるならそう言ってよ。無視されるのって結構傷ついちゃうな。
え？
I looked at Remy. She was sad.
あ、
もしかして私の話聞いてなかった？
I hesitated a moment before nodding. She poked a finger into my cheek and pushed.
石、てっきり無視されたかと思ったよ。 紛らわしいことしない。
Ow, her nail. Her nail was digging into my skin.
あ、大丈夫？
Remy whispered, finally pulling back her hand. Yeah, that was always what she said when she was worried about me.
お昼ぐらいから顔色良くないよ。元気もないみたいだし。もしかして誰かにひどいこと言われた？だったら私に教えて。怒ってきてあげるから。
I'll go get mad at them. She was like a big sister or my mom. Remy could be pretty nosy. Well, she'd have to be if she could care about a weird loser like me. I appreciated the fact that she was worried about me. Till now, whenever I had a problem, my only options were to keep it to myself or write an anonymous post on @chan. Maybe I should ask her about Nanami. But when I'd asked her about the D-sword, she hadn't believed me at all. She'd reacted just like any sensible person would. If I told her, she'd either laugh it off or be freaked out. If that was the case, it'd be a waste of my time to try. All I needed from Remy was for her to be by my side. I could ask Kozupi or Senna for help with this problem instead.
相変わらず汚いね。
Remy whispered in exasperation as she stepped inside the base. But despite her complaints, she seemed happy, so I couldn't tell what she was really thinking.
変わってないな。この部屋の汚さがまさにタクって感じ。
If it's that bad, then you clean it. I sighed and turned on the computer.
ちょっとちょっと。帰ってくるなりパソコン？友達が来てるんだから少しはおもてなししてあげようっていう気持ちにはならないのかな。ねえ、お話ししようよ。
Remy asked me for the impossible. She sat down on my sofa. I'm still traumatized by the last green. No green. Never green. If I tried to have a one-on-one chat with a 3D girl, I'd run out of things to discuss almost instantly. Lately, I'd had more chances to talk to Remy, and had started to get used to talking to her, but I still wouldn't last even 5 minutes. And right now, my head was full of thoughts of Nanami, and I didn't feel up to having a cheerful conversation. I'm sure it would look like I was ignoring her. I sat down in my chair, feeling like a pathetic loser. If I make it green, Sarah's gonna say something stupid. That's my guess.
ああ、そうですか。そういう態度なら私、帰る。勝手にすれば。
Oh, damn. I could hear Remy standing up. I turned around in surprise, and she was heading for the door. I tried to tell her to stop, but I was in such a panic I couldn't get the words out. Suddenly, she stopped and turned her head to look back at me.
妹さんのこと、心配？
How did you know?
どうしてそれを？
I hadn't said a word about Nanami to her.
独り言、ブツブツ言ってたから。ねえ、私と妹さん、どっちが大事？
Oh my lord. That was the worst question imaginable. You know how it is. There are mean girls out there who like to ask questions they know you can't answer. They only care about themselves, and they don't care about you at all. I never thought I'd actually hear those words spoken in real life, though. This was the ugly part of 3D girls. In the end, Remy was just another one of them. To be honest, I was disappointed. I felt stupid for even trying to open up to her. I should have known that 3D could never be 2D. Decided to just stop hanging out with her altogether. All of my interest in her instantly faded, and I let out an annoyed sigh. I wasn't going to stop her from leaving. In fact, I wanted her gone right now. But then, Remy did something unexpected.
答えて。私か、妹さんか、どっちか選んで。
Who asks questions like that? She took oh god. She took what looked like a paring knife out of her bag and put it up to her wrist. I was stunned and terrified.
私を選んで私だけを見て
Was that supposed to be a threat? Was this who she really was? Was she actually insane?
お願い私を見てよ
君は僕だけを見てくれてないじゃないか
I made the mistake of giving her a serious response. You were supposed to just ignore crazy girl threats. I regretted it, but it was too late.
見てるよ
Her voice was horribly cold. Her eyes were bloodshot. There was a mocking smile on her lips.
だから邪魔者は排除するのあなたの妹をさらったのも私だし
You're lying.
タクに選んでもらうためなら私こんなことだってするよ
Then, Rimi took the knife that was pressed up against her wrist and slowly began to draw it across her skin.
やめろ
Jesus Christ. Well,
やめろって何が
that was fun. Suddenly, I was staring at my computer monitor again. I could hear Rimi behind me. She sounded confused. I quickly turned around, and she was, oh my god, and saw she was sitting on the sofa. She had a manga in her hand and was looking at me, stunned.
タク顔色悪いけどどうかしたの
うん
Oh, it was just a delusion. That one scared me.
メールだよボケナス今の何
いや
Rimi had just heard my Sarah10 email voice. That was really embarrassing. I opened my email program and saw 3 messages from Grim telling me to get my ass in the chat room. I realized that I hadn't chatted with Grim in a while. We used to talk all the time. But since I'd been staying off ESO, we hadn't talked for about 10 days. Hey, you Nightheart. I've been waiting. We got new nice guy. What the hell does that mean? Also, I didn't even see what AA, short for ASCII art. Pictures made from only the letters and basic symbols included in the ASCII code standard. Used mainly on message boards. Yeah, I can't read half of them. I'm like, they're supposed to look like pictures of faces and shit. I truly, like, that one I get. I can see what that one is. But like half of them make no sense to me. I'm just old. We got what? Too lazy to find A. New gen, dude. New gen. New gen equals nice guy? New gen NG nice guy. Shouldn't be. I mean, that's really dumb. Why would you... Again, this is internet culture. Why would you shorten? Why would you abbreviate something to be longer than the actual? I hate the internet sometimes. Shouldn't be that hard to figure out, right? Anyway, it's here. The 7th murder.
どうしたの
Rimi must have noticed my surprise because she stood up and came over next to me. She peered at the monitor from over my shoulder.
第7の事件
Another one. Another new gen murder. How long was this gonna keep happening? The next one be the one where they finally got me? Or the one after that?
タク気にすることないよ何も怖いことなんてないタクは狙われたりなんかしない全部タクの被害妄想ね
She was trying to cheer me up, but she had no evidence at all. That's not going to make me feel better, Rimi. Anyway, had Grim gotten a job at the New Gen advertising division or something? He was constantly telling me about them whenever one happened. Once again, he posted a bunch of links to news sites. This must have been his way of telling me to look at them. I clicked the link and bit down hard on my lip. Please don't have pictures. Please, you don't need pictures. We don't need pictures. Too cute and puzzled. I get it. At 4:50 a.m. on the 4th, the bodies of 3 men were found hanging from a transmission tower along the train tracks of Shibuya Ward. Oh, that's why they didn't show up this morning. Or in the morning. It was just the Lady Dokuns. He was like, oh, they're usually late. Turns out they were more than late. The bodies belonged to 3 Shibuya residents, a college student named Saburo Anzawa, a part-time worker named Ryo Takagi, and Kohei Fujita, who was unemployed. A police investigation... Okay, maybe it's not the same people, but... A police investigation revealed that the bodies of all 3 had been severed at the waist, and that the cut did not appear to be made cleanly, as if by a blade. The lower and upper halves of the deceased were each attached to different bodies, sewn together with sturdy thread. Oh my god. The letters DQN were found on their foreheads, which the police believe may be a message from the killer. Pictures of the crime scene were uploaded to 8chan. No thank you. No need for that. A major internet message board before the media's reports, and is already being called the 7th in the so-called New Generation Madness cases. What? Users of the board have named it the Dokun Puzzle due to the way the bodies of the victims were. There should be a period there. Dokun is a word used to refer to a thug or person who lacks common sense. Some members of the families are preparing to take legal action against certain inappropriate comments by @channel users, and reaction online has been mixed. Ah yes, suing anonymous forum users. That always ends so well. Oh boy. A new gen. Whose eyes are... This isn't new gen. The cops are idiots. Trying to say that we Dokun hating @channers are behind it? The way they rip the bodies apart and put them back together is kind of like a puzzle. I wish they'd replace my top half with that of a hot guy. Get that fake psychic Nishijo to tell you who's behind it, lol. It's the New Generation Madness and I can't bear it! Oh, I see that one. It's like a little bear face. I get it. Okay, yep, we got it. Group dive, pregnant man, crucified, vampire. I don't understand any of these. Truly. I'm trying. Brain dead. Yummy hand. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that one. Oh, God. They called it Yummy Hand? Ugh. Dokun Puzzle.
今日午前4時50分頃、東京都渋谷区の線路沿いで男性3人の他殺死体が鉄柱に吊り下げられているのを通りかかった新聞販売員の男性が発見しました。警察の調べによりますと、殺されたのはいずれも渋谷区に住む無職藤田康平さん、大学生の安沢三郎さん、とび職の高木亮さんの3人です。3人とも胴体の部分が切断され、それぞれの上半身と下半身が別々に入れ替えられて糸で縫合されていました。3人の額にはそれぞれ謎の傷がつけられており、警察では犯人からのメッセージではないかとみて調べています。渋谷では2ヶ月ほど前から猟奇殺人事件が頻発しており、警察では今回の事件も同一犯による犯行の可能性が高いとみて捜査を続けています。
The last video I saw showed the faces of the 3 murdered men. I recognized their faces. Oh, okay, it was them.
あいつらだ。
知ってるの？
昨日僕に絡んできた。
Oh no, it was those guys. Oh no. I gave them my wallet, but they still attacked me anyway. I passed out, and when I woke up, Kozupi was there. The 3 of them were covered in blood. I took my wallet out of my pocket and stared at it. When I'd woken up, Kozupi was holding my wallet, and she'd given it back to me. Could she be the one who... No, that wasn't right. When I'd seen them last, their faces were smashed up and they were covered in blood. But they certainly weren't sliced in half. Plus, they weren't sliced in half, they were pulled in half. They'd been killed after Kozuki and I had left. It had to be Shogun. He was taunting me. He was trying to destroy my mind. I felt like I was about to throw up. My hands were racked with pain. My hands? What? My stomach was racked with pain. I put my hands up against it to try and make it go away. Would I be next? Would the next one finally be the one where I was killed? My brain like switches words around and then sometimes adds words that aren't there. It's weird. A hand reached out from behind me and flicked the switch on the monitor. The screen went black.
落ち着いて。気にすることないよ。ただの偶然だって、きっと。
How could Rimi be so calm? There was no way this could all just be a coincidence.
それより、お腹空いちゃった。ねえ、私が行きつけのお店があるんだけど、そこにご飯食べに行かない？安くて美味しいんだよ。私が保証する。まあ、お客さんはおじさんが多いから、私みたいのが一人で行くのはちょっと恥ずかしいけどね。あ、それと、駅の中に入らなくちゃいけないんだった。渋谷駅の構内にあるから。ちなみに、山手線内回りと外回りのホーム、どっちにもあるんだけど、私は断然内回りの方が好き。
Dinner, huh? I didn't feel like eating at all. It felt like there was a knife at my throat. Like somebody was saying they could kill me at any time. Please, just leave me alone. What did I ever do to you? I'm just so tired of this all. God, her sword is so cool. I think Senna's is still the coolest. Senna's officially is the coolest one. It's got that like split blade, but Ayasa's is a close second. Ayase Kishimoto was staring out the window, only half paying attention to anything going on around her. There were no bars on the windows like there were in the rooms at Arkheart Medical, the place she'd been before. Outside, she could see the high-rise buildings of Shinjuku, and beyond them, a blazing evening sky. A few pigeons were flapping their wings furiously as they crossed the sky. Occasionally, she would wince in pain. Her eyes were empty and just a little tired. Her lips weren't humming the songs that had so entranced the young people of Shibuya. After her failed suicide attempt, she'd been brought to a big general hospital in Yoyogi. Her wounds had almost completely healed. The doctors had said it was a miracle that a fall from that height had only ended in a few minor scrapes and bruises. Still, she'd hit her head hard, so she'd been hospitalized for observation. She'd been here for over a week already. Of course, observation meant nothing more than a simple checkup every 1 or 2 days. Once every 2 days, that's completely different. The rest of the time she was left alone. She had the room to herself. There were no other beds in it. Her D-sword was up against the window. It was flashing with a pale light. It had been there the whole time, but nobody had noticed it. She didn't get many visitors. Phantasm fans were supposedly coming in huge numbers every day, but the hospital had banned them from seeing her so they wouldn't bother the other patients. She and her family weren't close. Almost nobody else came to see her. Her bandmates had come to see her once. When she brought up breaking up the band, though, they'd stopped coming at all. That's sad.
岸本さん、体温計ピピってなりました？
The door opened and a nurse in white came in. Ayase slowly turned toward her and then took the thermometer out from under her arm, just like she just remembered it was there. The nurse looked at the number on the digital display and wrote it down on the chart.
37度1分と、ちょっと熱っぽいかしら。ズキズキする。頭。
Ayase winced in pain again.
あら、また頭痛？でもそれは薬の副作用よ。気にしなくてもそのうち良くなりますよ。
The nurse smiled as she spoke and took the thermometer. Her expression was gentle, and there was something about her that put a patient at ease. Why do I feel like she's gonna be like the ultimate villain? She's so nice. She's like so nice every time, and it's getting really like unnerving. She keeps showing up, and she's super nice, and that's scary. But Ayase put her hand to her forehead and shook her head. Ever since she came here, Ayase had been dealing with a dull headache. Painful wasn't the word for it. There was an unpleasant sensation of something pulsing in her head. It was making it hard for her to think, and her whole body felt as heavy as lead. This had happened to Ayase before, too. It was when she was at Arkhart Medical. The headaches had lasted 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. She'd been unable to sleep and emotionally unstable. It was the past she didn't want to remember, past she'd sealed away, her memories of 2 years ago. The pain was the trigger that made them come back in flashes. Oh, Christ. The fuck? A dark room, a small window with bars. Except for the small window, the walls were entirely covered with mirrors. She'd been restrained in a steel chair in the center of the room. There was some kind of device on her head, with cords streaming off of it. Her hands were bound behind the chair's back. This is vile. I hate this. Her head was restrained and tilted up at a slight angle. There was no one else in the room. Their only sounds were her panting for air and the straining of the metal chair. Drool flew from her lips, and a bestial howl came from her throat that one would have thought impossible for a girl her age. It was a very quiet form of torture. I don't like this. I don't like this. There was only one thing they were doing to her. A single drop of water was falling on her forehead from above, in the same spot every time, at exactly 5 seconds. Oh my god! At exact 5-second intervals. That was all. She'd been stuck like that for 2 days with no rest. Now all she could think of was when the next drop would fall. Her senses were pushed to her limits. Each time a drop fell, it felt like every nerve in her body was being ripped apart. Like all the bones in her body were being shattered. Like a long sharp awl was being driven into her skull. Like all the fluids in her body, blood included, were freezing. Like all of her skin was rotting and slowing off. It was more than enough to drive her mad. That's, I don't like that at all. She snapped back to reality and found herself panting and clutching the sheets tightly. Her whole body had started to shake when her dark memories came back. The nurse was gone from her room. It was dinner time, and there was a frantic rush of movement outside the doors. Ayase repeated the words that the nurse had said to herself. Was this headache really caused by the medicine? Or had she hit her head when she'd fallen? Or was it an effect of her old memories? She couldn't tell. Ayase wiped the sweat from on her forehead and began to laugh.
構わないわ。今さら何をされたって。あれはあの神罰を耐え抜いたんだから。もう迷わない。私は。
She whispered, as if in a trance. Then, suddenly, she heard a sound coming from the hallway. It was the pleasant sound of shoes on linoleum. They weren't the nurse's shoes, she could tell that much. The footsteps were getting closer to her room. There was a knock at the door. She pressed her lips together tightly in a frown.
失礼します。
Oh no. I thought it was Misumi. I was like, oh my. Okay, this is slightly better, I think. It was a man. He was holding a fruit basket, what the type commonly given as gifts. Ayase recognized the man. Thus, she looked at him suspiciously.
どうも。あ、別に怪しいもんじゃないっすよ。
I will never get over how funny that face of his is.
知ってるわ。
He was a detective with the Tokyo Metropolitan Police. He'd once been tailing her as a person of interest in the Nugent case. He scratched his head cheerfully. For a detective, he seemed surprisingly laid back.
いやー嬉しいっす。君みたいな美人に覚えててもらえて。記憶力いいんすね。
The detective walked toward her bed. Ayase glanced at the D-sword on the windowsill. It was too far away for her to reach out and grab. That seems weird, considering you could, like, materialize it out of thin air. So, like, if you already made it, you can't just, like, make, like, whoosh-shoom. You have to actually, like, get up and get it. What are the rules?
そうは思えないわ。目的は
鋭いっすね。
The detective acted like he was shaken, but it was felt a little like an act.
まあちょっと綾瀬ちゃんに聞きたいことがあって。あ、これよかったら食べてほしいっす。
He offered her the fruit basket with an innocent smile, practically forcing her to take it by placing it at the foot of her bed.
うまいっすよ。あと高かったと。
いらない。
まあそう言わずせっかく買ってきたんで、後でお母さんが来た時にでも切ってもらって。あ、しまった。
Wow.
綾瀬ちゃんはもう何年も両親に会ってないんだったっすね。
Smooth, dude. Smooth. Very flawless transition. It was clear the detective knew exactly what he was doing, but Ayase didn't really care. Her parents had disowned her when she was very little. They were the type to really care about what the neighbors thought of them, and Ayase was a problem child that they were eager to get rid of. She wasn't entirely cut off from them, though. They sent her enough money to cover her living expenses each month.
申し訳ないっす。
No, you're not. He gave her a little bob of his head in apology. Ayase was only now starting to recover from her flashback earlier, and she really didn't want to talk to the detective at all. She decided to get this over with as fast as possible.
聞きたいことって何？アリバイ？
違うっすよ。それは前に散々聞いたし。もう綾瀬ちゃんの容疑は晴れたっす。君は白、真っ白。
目星はついたの？犯人の。
それは教えられないんすよ。捜査上の秘密っす。
匠。
秘密っす。
The detective was grinning. He was clearly hiding something. When he laughed, you could really see just how young he was.
しかし西条くんは不思議な少年っすね。彼を見ていると殺人の容疑者にはとても見えない。もしあれで本当に犯人だったとしたら、まさに人の皮をかぶった悪魔っす。
まだ容疑者なのね、彼。
いや、そういうわけじゃないっすよ。
The detective laughed and shook his head.
ああ、今の話誰にも言っちゃダメっすからね。情報漏洩すると上司に怒られるんすよ。まあ当然なんすけど、この前も先輩のとばっちりで怒られたばっかで。綾瀬ちゃんも一度会ってると思うんすけど、覚えてるかな。バンさんっていう髪がボサボサで武将髭生やしたおっさんでか。
Ayase remembered him. When they'd come to talk to her, it was the older man, not the one in front of her, who'd done most of the speaking. He'd been pretty aggressive and sneaky, too.
あの人がすぐこのバカってどうなるんすよ。そのくせ自分は本来の捜査をせずに、なんだかわけのわからないことばっか調べてて、挙句の果てに自分まで無理やり付き合わされて、最近胃が痛いんすよね。いや、まあ根はいい人っすし、勘が異常に鋭い人で、過去にも難事件をいくつか解決に導いたらしいんすけどね。
その話をするためここに来たのは。
The detective chuckled when Ayase cut him off.
ああ、いや、申し訳ないっす。つい愚痴入っちゃったっすね。今の話は全面的に内緒にしてほしいっす。諏訪守、一生のお願いっすよ。
それで
一つ目は、なんであんなことを？
Even Ayase could tell he was talking about how she jumped off the roof.
もう何度も話したわ、他の刑事さんに。
邪神王グラジオールの復活を阻止するためですか？
死ぬつもりなんてなかった。魂を一つ上のステージに持っていこうとしただけよ。
例の若者の間で話題になった君の歌についても似たようなこと言ってたっすよね。
That was his second question. Ayase sighed a little.
ニュージェネのことを歌ったものなんかじゃないわ、あの詩は。グラジオール記黙示録詩編のインスピレーションを受けて作った第3章102節よ。
I gotta know about this. A fictional novel based on Eastern European legends of Gladiator, the King of Wicked Hearts, a 23-volume high fantasy series that depicts the war between 7 Black Knights and Gladiator. Written by R.C.O. Zegler, published between 1929 and 1951, and translated into several languages, but commercially unsuccessful due to its complex writing style. Other books in the Gladiator mythos include The Great Book of the Kings of Gladiator, Wicked Hearts Chapter, and Letter from the Apostles. Together, they form the Gladiator Saga. Fascinating, right?
世界に邪神王グラジオールが現れようとしている。復活を阻止するにはグラジオールが流した黒い血によって作られた7つの杭が必要。杭は剣へと形を変え、神罰を乗り越えた7人の黒騎士の手に渡る。目には目を、歯には歯を。
I saw the word sword and I was like, all right, well, there's clearly some kind of something here.
邪神を背負うし人間だけが邪神王を滅ぼせるのよ。
Okay, so how many people have swords? Okay, we got Ayase, we got Kozupi, Senna. I can't remember if there's a fourth one right now. Those are the only ones I can think of, and then Takumi kind of, but not really. Like, he can have one, he doesn't have it yet though. So that's 4 swords on the table, kind of like 3.5 swords. There's 3.5 swords on the table.
なんか映画みたいっすね。そういう壮大な設定は好きっす。
Ayase's eyes narrowed at the detective's comment.
設定じゃないわ、現実よ。
じゃあ最後の質問っす。
The detective ignored her protests, but she was used to that. Nobody had ever believed what she used to say, or what she had to say.
君や西条くんの他にも水明の生徒について何人か洗ったんすけどね。
He crossed his arms and let out a little sigh. It felt like an obvious act, but Ayase wasn't inclined to call him out.
何？
すごくバカバカしい質問なんすけど、刑事が質問するようなことじゃないんすよね、本当は。子供じみてるっていうか。
そう、質問する気がないなら出て行って。頭が痛いの。
ああ、いや実はね、バンさんが妙なことを言い出してるんすよ。君たちは魔法使いなんじゃないかって。
Ayase's eyes narrowed just a little as at the phrase "you guys."
違いますよね。
使えるわ。
She looked down at her hands instead of at the detective as she spoke.
綾瀬ちゃんって面白い子っすね。
でもニュージェネはグラジオールの騎士とは無関係。
ああ、そうっすか。まあどうでもいいんすけどね。
The detective yawned, disinterest in his words. And then suddenly... What is this ringtone? Was not expecting that. And then suddenly an electronic sound filled the room. The detective frantically pulled a phone out of his suit pocket.
まずった。病院って携帯禁止なんすよね。電源オープンして
Yeah, mute your phone, dude.
うわ、しかも女からだし。
Like,
付き合って4年にな
even
る
if your
ラブラブ
ringtone's
の
a
彼
banger,
女がい
turn
るん
off
す
your phone in the
よ。
hospital. Or at least mute it. He grinned as he pressed the button to reject the call. He turned back toward Ayase.
綾瀬ちゃんは映画見るっすか？スパークウォーズって知らない？それに出てくるダース・スパイダー伯爵のテーマなんす。今のメロディー。
Oh, that's really funny. She wasn't interested in movies at all. Ayase had already decided she was under no obligation to answer any more of his questions, and silently turned to look out the window.
実は自分スパークウォーズオタクなんすよ。あ、興味ないっすか？そりゃ失礼したっす。じゃ、自分はこれで。
The detective left the room without waiting for the answer. Ayase didn't bother to watch him as he went. Her eyes were watching the sky as it shifted from twilight to azure night. I love me an azure night. What? Okay.
このボケナスずっと待ってたんだからね。
Is this an episode of Bloodtoon? Is he watching?
あなたのことなんか大嫌い。でも大好き。
I absent-mindedly watched Saratan move around on my monitor. The final episode of Bloodtoon had aired late last night. The story had really picked up by the end, and At-chan had reviewed it highly. This was my third time watching it, but I wasn't able to focus on it at all. I looked at the clock, and it was past 10 p.m. Rimi had left at around 8. She cheered me up and given me kind words of encouragement. Having her there made me feel less lonely than I had been for the past week. But Rimi didn't seem to think things were as serious as they really were. It was as if she was trying to avoid any talk about New Gen. Maybe she thought I was annoying? She'd said somebody she knew had been hurt during the earthquake. Maybe she was busy dealing with that and didn't have time for me. No, but... Maybe I was paranoid, sure, but I was still in danger. I could be killed at any moment, even right now. There had to be some reason why Shogun was so obsessed with me. If I could figure it out, maybe it would give me some clue as to how to fight back.
そういえば、あのおじさん、別れ際にこんなこと言ってたのら。中でも一番特別なのは、その目、誰の目を産み落とした少年。
Whose eyes are those? You couldn't go anywhere in Shibuya without hearing those words now. Online, everybody has even started using it as the killer's name. I'd been using that phrase since I was a little kid. Shogun must have known that, and this was his way of sending me a message, or maybe challenging me. When did I start using that phrase? Felt like somebody had said it to me. I vaguely remembered writing in an essay I'd done in elementary school. I'd even made it the title, Whose Eyes Are Those? Could barely remember what the essay was about. Now I wanted to know. What had I written in it? Did they still have it at home? It was so old that they probably thrown it out years ago. But I'd always had a habit of putting important things in a big empty box of candy I'd kept. I'd called it my treasure box. That's adorable. There was a chance it was still there. What should I do? Should I head home and check? But... I didn't want to have to face Nanami. I wouldn't know what to say.
はあ、僕はどうしようもなくヘタレだ。
I slowly stood up from my chair and then went over and collapsed on the sofa. What?
これは違うんだからね。私は別にさ、立ち食いそばが好物なわけじゃないさ。
Oh. Is this like...
何
Is
ニヤ
the
ニヤ
show
して
still
ん
going
の？
on?
このボケナス。もう怒った。
Okay.
うなれ、侍コンデンサー。
I looked up at the ceiling. I thought it was like something on his sofa though. I looked up at the ceiling, half listening to Sarah's dialogue. The ceiling was made of cold, exposed steel. It's weird because it looks textured. It looks like a textured ceiling, which is odd because it's a shipping container, but I guess I don't know what the inside of a shipping container looks like, so. There was nothing like knots and wood grain for me to look at and pretend I was seeing a human face. Suddenly, in the corner of my eye, I saw a metal box with a design I recognized mixed in with the boxes of H games on my bed in the loft.
あれって
What? Oh, was it the treasure box? I leapt off the sofa and went to the little ladder to look at the bed. A square, reddish-brown box, about the size of a B5 sheet of paper. Written on the lid was the word Sable. This was it. My treasure box. I must have brought it from home. I didn't remember bringing it at all. Good job, me! Good job! I brought it down from my bed and opened the lid. It was filled with old tests, essays, and scraps from my sketchbook. Most of it was papers, and just a few tiny objects. I took them all out of the box and began to rummage through them. I found what I was looking for almost immediately. After all, it was on the very top. Whose eyes are those? An old, faded essay. The handwriting on the title was awful. Was there some important secret hidden here within these words? Something that Shogun was obsessed with? What did the homeless man mean when he'd said, most special? I gulped and began to read, being careful not to miss a single word. Whose Eyes Are Those? By Takumi Nishijo, Class 4-3. I dream a lot. In my dream, I'm a grown-up and I get in a time machine and go see myself in the present. The grown-up me doesn't look like me at all. Also, there are a lot of buttons in the time machine. One turns on a shower. One gives you shampoo. I asked the grown-up me how it works, and he said it can go to caveman times or dinosaur times. This is adorable, by the way. He asked me what was my worst class, and I said math. He said there's even a switch that will make you good at math. I tried to flip the switch, and he got mad. He said I needed to study harder instead. Well, then what's the point of the switch? The grown-up me only got mad the one time, and other than that, he was nice. He told me which girl I'm going to marry and stuff too, but that's a secret. I also asked about God. He said God's real. I think he's real too. Mom said that God sees everything, so if I do bad stuff, he'll send me to hell. So I think I shouldn't do any bad stuff at all. I need to be nice to my little sister too. Mom said that when you do bad things, it's not God that sees it and comes for you, but the scary man. The scary man is the whose eyes are those monster. If he looks at you, you go to hell. God's eyes and the whose eyes are those eyes are everywhere, and there are lots of them. They're in the sky and on the ceiling and the walls and at school. So I need to study a lot and do lots of good things, I think. But since they're always watching, it's embarrassing to go to the toilet or take a bath. Also, ever since I was little, when I'm not sleeping and I just close my eyes, I'll sometimes dream. My mind is like a game, or a manga. But when I do that, the whose eyes are those comes, so I don't want to do it. I asked Mom and she said never do it. But even when I'm writing this essay, I ask grown-up me in my dream about the time machine, and he says he knows about it. But I'm a kid, so he wouldn't tell me. So from now on, I want to do lots of good things so I can beat the whose eyes are those monster. The end. They really captured the, like, endless rambling of, like, childhood. But the only thing I got out of reading the essay was that even back then, I'd been able to sense the gaze of God. Maybe I was a really weird kid. It seemed impossible to get anything out of this bizarre essay. It'd be easier to decipher hieroglyphs. Then I noticed some scribblings on the back of the paper. I remembered that back then, I'd love to scribble on things. Whenever there was a picture of some important old guy in my social studies textbook, I'd always give him a funny-looking mustache or sunglasses, and I'd love to make little flipbook manga in the corners of my notebooks. I started to have more and more fun drawing. One time, I'd even had them buy me a sketchbook. Nobody had ever told me I was good at drawing, though. I flipped over the paper to look at the scribbles, smiling a little as I remembered the past. Is that the thing? Is that the thing you see when it goes all... When you have like one of those delusions and the screen flashes? Is that thing? Because that looks like that thing. I was wondering what the heck that thing was. What I saw was incomprehensible scribblings. IR2. That's the name of the chapter. Incomprehensible with one exception. There was something I'd seen very recently.
IR2.
Was it a formula? Something else? Maybe just a meaningless combination of numbers and letters? I flipped those. I couldn't tell. But... Oh, that... I forgot about that. It was the same formula Shogun had shown me in the chat when he'd first made contact with me. Ah, that was a long time ago. Whose eyes are those? And IR2. Both of them were written in the back of this essay that I'd written many years ago. One of them I'd even forgotten myself. So if Shogun knew it, that meant that he really had been reading my thoughts. My brain is falling apart. Oh my god.
Aww.
That thing is creepy. Bon was staring closely at a file oh my god, it's over. Oh my god. Bon was staring closely at a file as he sat in Frisia's meeting room, or rather the small space in their office, surrounded by shelves that served as one. Yua was sitting across from him, looking timid and scared. Every once in a while, she'd glance across from him. She looked like a kid showing a parent her report card. Bon was reading the report she'd compiled on Takumi Nishijo and the Nugin cases. It even had the chat log between Takumi and Shogun from the day before the Crucified incident. Yua's conclusion was that Takumi was behind the Nugin killings.
すごいわね。これ全部一人で調べたの？
はい、一応。
Yua looked down at her feet as Momose gave her the compliment. She seemed to be staring directly at the Garo Froggy straps on her bag. She was talking to a police detective at the head of a private detective agency. They were professionals at this kind of thing. From their perspective, anything she'd try to do on her own would probably just look like a child pretending to be a detective. But both Bon and Momose were impressed at the quality of her report.
なかなかいい着眼点だ。よく調べたな。とりわけこの西条匠の多重性ってのが興味深い。西条匠は多重人格であり、オリジナルとなった西条匠の人格が眠っている時、つまり他の人格が活動中に事件を起こしている。本当に面白いわ。まあでもちょっとばかり現実離れしすぎてるかな。
刑事さんはその西条くんのこと犯人だって考えてないんですか？
はっきり言っていいかい？
US face tensed up for a second, and then she nodded.
警察じゃ西条匠は容疑者として見ていない。
へえ、そうなの。
It wasn't just Yua. Momose was surprised too. Bon chuckled a little. He leaned back into his chair and put his hands behind his head.
少なくとも貼り付け事件じゃ西条は白だ。遺体を貼り付けていた杭には指紋がべったり付着しててな。西条の指紋を手に入れて照合してみたんだが全く合致しなかった。
そんな。
Yua began to turn pale, and her lips started shaking. As the theory she'd believed in so much collapsed right in front of her face, the first thing she felt was guilt about all the things she'd said to Takumi.
杭にあった指紋から容疑者についてはほぼ固まってんだ。まだマスコミにも公表してないけどな。ちなみにそれ諏訪のお手柄だったりする。
諏訪ちゃんは頑張ってるっていうのに、バンちゃんはよくここでのんびりしていられるわね。
実は俺捜査本部から外されたんだわ。
Damn.
はあ。
本来の捜査サボって G レートのこととか調べてんの上司にバレちゃってな。
From Bon's perspective, there was actually no need for Sua to call him and tell him about the 7th murder. He'd wanted to tell his junior partner that, but had missed his chance.
あんたね、もっとうまく立ち回りなさいよ。まあバンちゃんに G レートのことを教えた私にも責任はあるけど。
気にすんなって。それに G レートの件は個人的にも気になってたんだ。まあ西条にしても貼り付け以外の事件じゃまだ捜査線上にいる。もしかするとユアちゃんの推理が正しいかもしれん。
ニュージェネは同一犯による連続殺人事件じゃないって警察は考えてるの？
まだなんとも。ただついさっき第7の事件が起きたようだしな。個人的には犯人は複数いると思ってる。いろいろ喋っちまった。口外したって知られたらクビになっちまう。今のはオフレコな。
He smiled mischievously and put his finger to his lips.
で、本題なんだが。
Yua was surprised. She was sure that she'd been called out here to talk about Takumi.
聞きたいことってのは学校のことなんだよ。ユアちゃんは青井瀬名って子知ってるかい？君の同級生のはずなんだが。
Yua thought a little and then shook her head apologetically.
名前は聞いたことがあるような気がしますけど、話したことはありません。
ああ、そうか。
その人が犯人なんですか？
ああ、全くの別件だ。
No, she just has a giant
その子のこと
sword
調
out
べ
of
てたか
nowhere
ら
and can teleport. Don't worry about it. Whoops. Well, good news. I quick saved.
あんたさっき女子高生の生態がどうとかって。
Bon gave her a wink. Then he quickly turned back to Yua.
例えば学校でものすごい手品を使う女生徒がいるって噂を聞いたことは？
いえ、ありませんけど。
さっぱり話が見えないわね。何のこと？
例えば何もない空間から剣を取り出すような手品とか。
Yua's face jolted upwards. Her expression was filled with shock.
どうしてそれ。
Bun seemed a little surprised, despite being the one who'd asked the question.
心当たりがあるのか？
Yua hesitated for a moment before giving him a firm nod.
どこで見た？
駅の近くの地下道です。西条くんと岸本さんが。
Oh, she saw that, huh?
フェスだな。それで
Yua gave him a brief description of how she'd chased after Takumi 2 weeks ago. How she'd gone to the manga cafe to talk to him. How she'd been a little too forceful when talking to him and he'd run away. How she chased him all through the Shibuya, how he'd eventually lost her, and then when she was about to give up, she'd seen him and Ayase going into a tunnel.
だから私、その階段の上から二人の様子をこっそり伺っていたんです。二人は階段の一番下で何か話していて、どんなことを話していたかは聞き取れなかったんですけど、そしたら突然岸本さんが剣を何もないところから取り出したんです。すごく大きな剣でバッグにも入らないような。
まさか。
俺が見たものと同じだな。俺が見たのは岸本じゃなかったかな。さっき名前を出した葵瀬名っていう少女だ。実は葵が剣を振り回してたっていう目撃証言が渋谷のあちこちから出てる。
その手品、渋谷の若い子たちの間で流行ってるのかしら。
でも私が見たあれは手品にはとても見えませんでした。
Well, that's the point of a magic trick, silly.
それに
他にも何か見たの？
信じてもらえるかどうかわからなくて、誰にも話したことはないんですけど、あの時岸本さんは剣を出しただけじゃなく
Oh,
て。
did you see the double fess? Yua paused for a moment to wet her dry lips. She didn't seem sure whether or not she should speak. Her gaze was wandering about the room, looking anywhere but the people in front of her. But eventually, she seemed to make up her mind and looked straight at Momose.
二人に分身したんです。
Yeah.
まるで
She saw that
本当にその場
too.
に二人いるみたいでした。私、わけがわからなくて。
There was a heavy silence in the meeting room. None of the three of them seemed to have any idea what to say.
とにかく一体どんな種があるのかわかんねえが、そんな手品みてえな真似ができる連中がこの渋谷には何人かいるらしい。それと岸本綾瀬も葵瀬名も西条匠と接触したことは確認済みだ。これが偶然とは思えねえわけよ。
西条くん、
あの少年の周囲ではどうも現実離れしたことばかりが起きてるような気がする。
Bon remembered what he'd said during his phone call.
怪獣か魔法使いで済ませられるならよっぽどいいけどな。
The other two didn't hear his whisper. Momose had one of her employees bring them tea to break the oppressive silence. She took a sip and sighed. Then she forced a smile and tried to change the subject.
ところでゆあちゃん、そのカバンにぶら下がってるカエル、最近流行ってるんでしょ？
は はい。
You would let out a sigh of relief, and glad to be off the subject.
なんて言うんだっけ？
ゲロカエルンです。
いろいろ種類が出てるんじゃなかった？ 10 種類ぐらい。
はい。私は友達からもらっただけなので詳しくは知らないんですけど。
なんだってこんな手抜き商品が流行るんだろうな。見た目だって俺の方がずっと可愛いぞ。
Oh my god.
バンちゃん、寝言は寝てから言いなさい。
冗談だって。
私も実はどうして流行っているのかよくわからないんです。
あら、結構可愛いと思うけどね。
ももちゃんの見る目も衰えたな。
世論は私の方が正しいって証明してるじゃない。バンちゃんも買いに行った方がいいわよ。
Is the fact that these things are popular despite the fact that they're quote unquote not cute? I think they're adorable personally, but maybe I'm under their influence too. Maybe they got to me somehow. Is that gonna be like a plot point? At some point they're gonna be like, yes. With our ultimate, like that was the test run for, was it Noah? Was the freaking Garrow Froggies.
一体どこへ行けば買えるものなんだ？
ゲロカエルンの専門ショップがあちこちにあって。
They have their own store. That's crazy.
専門ショップだ？
そこで金曜日に行列に並べば買えると思います。
金曜日？
毎週金曜日に新しいデザインのものが発売になるんです。好きな子はコンプリートとか言って全部集めてるみたいで。
Bon and Momose had begun to glance at each other as Yua spoke. Bon was stroking his chin.
金曜か。
Oh, Friday.
流行るとは思えないものが流行ってて。
Oh my god. I didn't.
G レートは毎週末に上昇する。
まさかバンちゃん。
当たってみる価値はあるかもな。
When I went to school on Thursday, I got an unexpected offer from Misumi to go visit Ayase in the hospital. I hadn't thought of that at all, and it caught me off guard. But for some reason, before I could answer, Rimi had said she wanted to go. I ended up going along with them. Just to be clear, it's not that I was some cold person who didn't care about her, but with the threat of Shogun looming, I didn't have it in me to worry about other people. I don't want to die. Misumi had gone in through the front door, but when he got to the lobby, he didn't seem sure what to do.
どうしたの？
いや、岸本の病室ってどこなんだろうなって思ってよ。
Had he come all this way without actually bothering to check? If so, what an idiot.
ここは外来棟だよ。病棟は隣。
そうなのか。
大地、しっかりしてよ。
AH Tokyo General Hospital. This was the hospital I'd come to ever since I was little. I'd just been here a while ago, in fact, so I had a pretty good idea of the basic layout. Suddenly, I remembered what had happened to Dr. Takashina and let out a small moan that the others didn't hear. As Misumi headed for the inpatient rooms, I looked behind me.
で、病棟の何号室だと思う？
そんなのわかんないよ。
If it's like 666 or something, that's that would be too much. This is a general hospital with any number of departments in it. I would guess.
多分外科じゃないかな。でももしかすると精神科かも。
When she'd fallen, she hadn't looked like she was that badly injured. And if she was in bad enough shape mentally to try and jump off a building, it was entirely possible they'd put her there. It had happened to me after the incident at Ofrant for some reason.
タクって物知りだな。
常識でしょ、常識。ね、タク。
Maybe not everybody. I wouldn't have known unless I'd been here so many times. Remy stopped just before we got to the inpatient area.
私、お手洗い行ってくる。先に行ってて。
She waved and headed back toward the outpatient wing. Misumi and I figured that we'd bother the other patients if we wandered around. So we decided to ask about ISA at the nurse's station. Just like I thought, they gave us the room. Oh my god! They gave us the number of a room in the psych ward. The room was small and simple in layout. I'm gonna try green. It's been a while, but I'm gonna take a chance with green again. Green, don't fail me. There was a bathroom on the right side from the entrance, and a bed near the back. The evening sun was pouring in through the window on the far wall. There was no sign of ISA herself. The bed was unmade, so she must have been here a little bit ago. Don't screw with me, Green. Don't ruin everything, Green.
どこ行ったんだ？
さあ。
ま、戻ってくるまで待つか。
For some reason, Misumi began to wander around the room and examine its contents. He wasn't showing the slightest shred of common decency. This room was practically ISA's personal apartment at this point. Her clothes and things were all over the place, and mixed in with the smell of disinfectant, you could smell the pleasant scent of a girl's room. Coming in here when she was absent felt kind of awkward, like we were intruding on her private life. Yeah, I am at, yeah, because you are
そういうの
doing that.
良くないよ。外で、待ってた方が。
ちょっと見るだけだって。お前も知りたいと思わねえのか？フェスの私生活ってやつをよ。
I'm pretty sure the last delusion we had involving Misumi and ISA, she cut his arms off or something like that. So you don't have a good record here, my dude.
興味あるだろ？
Well, yeah, I guess. ISA's private life was shrouded in mystery. It would be nice to take a little look. Incredibly immoral, but nice, I suppose. Misumi didn't seem hesitant in the slightest. Seeing how calm he was made me think it wasn't so bad after all. I looked back at the door to make sure nobody was coming, and then, heart pounding, the first place I headed toward was the bed. The sheets were just a little crumpled. I swear to God, if he sniffs this bed. If he pulls a Pokemon Sun and Moon right now. Don't do it. I lifted them up ever so softly, not sure of what I expected to find, but when I saw what was there, I couldn't believe my eyes. I mean... Okay. Beneath the sheets, I found underwear, both the top and the bottom. The purple panties were crumpled up in a ball, which meant they weren't freshly washed and folded. They'd been worn. What's more, there was only one bed in this room. It had to have been Ayase that was wearing them, nobody else. Incredibly hot. I quickly looked over at Misumi. He had a magazine in his hand. He was paying no attention to the bed or the astonishing things I'd found there. I looked back at the underwear. I gulped. My throat was parched. My trembling fingers were reaching out almost unconsciously toward the underwear. I touched them, feeling my heart race. There was a strange, fleshy feeling, like there was something beneath them. Something was wrong.
それは私のお稲荷さんだ。
What? What?
見ろよタク、 変な本があるぞ。
Oh, that was a great way for that to end. What the? I looked up in shock when Misumi said my name. I was standing in the corner of the room. I wasn't near the bed, and there was no underwear there. It was just a delusion. It felt like it was probably going to go in a really weird direction near the end. Probably best not to think about it. He'd taken a book off the shelf and was reading it.
ヌーだぜ、ヌー。この雑誌、まだ続いてたんだな。
New was a magazine that dealt with UFOs, aliens, psychic powers, religions, urban legends, strange phenomena, ancient super civilizations, and lost technology. Anything that even tangentially related to the occult. It didn't surprise me in the least that a girl who constantly talked about crazy stuff like Ayase was reading it.
こっちの文庫本は、何々グラジオール記黙示録詩編ファンタジー小説っぽいな。
I'd never heard of the book, but I'd heard the word gladiale somewhere before. Where was it again? It felt like it had been really recently.
岸本と付き合うとなると、この趣味に合わせないといけねえのか。大変そうだぜ、これは。
Oh, so annoying dealing with people and their all of their aspects. Ugh. Was he still planning on dating Ayase somehow? Last time she shot him down hard. Also, I don't even know. Never mind. Oh, hey, yeah. That's there. Suddenly I realized Ayase's D-sword was leaning up against the wall. Its shape reminded me of a space battleship you might see in a sci-fi movie. Yeah, it is the second coolest, for sure. Every time I saw it, I was struck by how cool it looked, and the way it combined beauty and cruelty. It wasn't glowing right now, it was just sitting there, but still, you could feel its heavy presence. Misumi showed no indication that he saw the sword. I guess normal people really couldn't see them. Maybe if I took it without telling Ayase, it would be mine then, right? I don't think that's how that works. If I could get a D-sword that easily, then all my problems would be solved, right? I gulped and reached out for the weapon with a trembling hand. I went to grab the blade. Bad idea. I thought I grabbed it, but my hand passed right through it. I grabbed only thin air. I tried again, but the same thing happened. I couldn't take it. I couldn't even touch it. Was the sword not real booted right now? And since there was no shared awareness of its existence, it was a delusion. It was just a delusion of Ayase's. An illusion, a dream, an afterimage.
何やってんだお前。
Misumi was looking at me, confused. We waited another 10 minutes, but there was no sign of Ayase. Rimi, who'd supposedly gone to the bathroom, was nowhere to be seen either. Where'd she gone?
リミって、この病室の場所知ってたか？
あ、
We'd asked about the room at the nurse's station after splitting up with Rimi. She might be wandering around looking for us.
あいつバカだからな。俺たちみたいに誰かに聞こうって発想がないのかもしんねえぞ。
探しに。
I was nervous without her around. There was no way to know for sure if this hospital was safe. If Shogun was reading my mind, he'd know exactly where I was.
そうだな。待つのも飽きたし、タクもあいつがいないと寂しいだろうからな。なあ、ぶっちゃけ、リミとはどうなんだ？
え？
付き合ってんのかって聞いてんだよ。お前ら、最近結構いい感じじゃね？
付き合ってないよ。
As I spoke, my face flushed. Me and Rimi dating. I'd had some delusions about the idea, sure. I wasn't into 3D girls, but Rimi was a pretty big part of my life now. But when Rimi had offered to stay by my side, she'd also said this.
そんなの友達だからに決まってるでしょ。
In other words, she saw me as a friend. She'd have no interest in dating a creepy otaku like me, obviously. And Rimi didn't seem like the type who'd want to date anyway. Misumi and I decided to split up and look for her. Misumi checked the floor below, so I went to check the one above us.
Amisha! Amisha!
I passed by an elderly man in his 50s. He was clearly a patient here. He was slowly staggering down the hallway, calling out for Amy, whoever that was. I ignored him and kept walking. Walking around the hospital didn't really bother me as much as I thought it would. It was probably because I'd been here so many times. Still, the thought that Shogun might appear from behind every corner or the open door made my heart race. There were those strange screams I sometimes heard too. They were bad for my heart. The walls and the floor of the hallway were all made of the same off-white color. Some doors were open and some weren't. I peeked inside a few of them to see if Shogun was lurking there. Each room had 2 beds, and I could see human-shaped forms beneath the sheets. Those must have been patients sleeping, but for some reason all of them were turned away from me, and I couldn't see their faces. There weren't many people out in the hallway. There'd been the old man calling for Amy, and then a nurse. They'd been the only 2 I'd seen. I didn't want to stay here for too much longer. I wasn't sure why, but that's how it felt. The air felt heavy. It wasn't unpleasant, but it felt like I didn't belong here. As I kept going forward, I saw the hallway turn to the right. There must be more rooms down there, I thought, as I nervously rounded the corner. I saw a wall right in front of me. Unlike the off-white of the other walls, this one was painted pure black. For some reason, my heart began to race faster and faster. I couldn't move. Did he reach the edge of reality? My vision began to swim. I thought I was just feeling dizzy and closed my eyes, but when I put my fingers on my eyelids, I could feel my eyes twitching beneath me. A cold feeling, like ice, worked its way up my body from below. I stood there, completely still, forgetting to breathe. I stared at the black in front of me. It felt like it was pulling me, drawing me in. An endless black that continued on for eternity. There was nothing there, but somebody was watching me. I could feel the gaze of God stabbing into the back of my neck. It was far, far worse than it had ever been at the base. Don't look at me. I used every scrap of mental power I had to force my eyes closed. Only then could I breathe. Panting, I stepped back. I lowered my head, turned around, and ran. I headed back to the floor ISA's room was on as fast as I could, stopping to catch my breath only after I'd headed down the stairs. I touched my neck and found it was covered with a thick, sticky layer of sweat. It wasn't just my neck. My whole body was soaked. What the hell was that? Was it Shogun reading my mind? I could still sense the gaze of God. It was still hard to breathe, and I was still cold. I felt exhausted. I wanted to go home. I wanted to have Rimi take me back to the base, and then I could stay there and never leave it again. Even if I did manage to find ISA, she'd be annoyed, not happy to see me. Misumi was only here because we was trying to get laid. I was an idiot to play along with it. I should just go home, before Shogun and Yua show up. Those 2 could appear anywhere at any time. They'd be able to find me easily. I couldn't relax anywhere. I headed back to ISA's room. I was staggering, barely able to walk. I had to put my hand on the wall for support. Was Misumi back, I wondered? I slowly kept moving forward, praying that he'd managed to find Rimi.
山井さんがまたアミーちゃんっていう名前を呼んでたんですよ。
I could hear the voices of the nurses in front of me. I looked up to see 2 nurses walking toward me. One was young, the other was a plump older woman.
一体誰のことを探してるのか。
それこの病院に伝わる怪談よ。誰も知らない幻の病室があって、
そこにアミーちゃんが入院してるらしいわ。もう何年も前からある噂。
I put my head down and waited for the two of them to pass. I held my breath so that they couldn't hear how much trouble I was having breathing. I could tell they were looking at me suspiciously, but all I could do was try to ignore them. When they were gone, I started to walk again. Somehow I managed to make it to the nurse's station. Ayase's room was in front of the nurse's station. I must have passed it. I groaned and wiped the sweat off my forehead. It still felt like somebody was watching me. I could feel a piercing sensation in my chest. My ears were ringing too. I felt awful. It seemed like I might pass out at any moment. I'd been just fine when I got here. What had happened to me? I was in so much pain, I just couldn't take it. I decided to get some help from one of the nurses at the nurse's station. There was only one person there. Evidently, she hadn't noticed me. She had her back turned and was muttering something as she worked. There was a clipboard in her hand. She was writing something on the paper it held. Oh, I'd met her before. It was Hazuki, the nurse. That can't be good, right? That's right. This was the mental ward at AH Tokyo General Hospital. Of course she'd be here. I talked to her twice in just the last month. Perfect. If she saw me, she'd help me out immediately. Just then, I'd heard a beeping noise. It sounded important. Hazuki put down her clipboard and flipped the switch in front of her. The beeping noise stopped. Evidently, someone had hit the button to call the nurse. She quickly ran out of the nurse's station. She seemed not to have noticed me. I was suffering so much, just a few feet away from her, and she didn't even see me. I couldn't stand. The vertigo was incredible. Helplessly, I went inside the nurse's station and decided to wait for her to come back. I found the stool she'd been sitting on and sat down on it. My head hurt so bad. It was like the earthquake a week ago. But the pain was different somehow. Maybe? I wanted something to drink. I'd been out of breath for so long that even breathing hurt. I took a quick glance around me. I saw the clipboard Hazuki had been writing on. I could see what was drawn on it. Excuse? Last time I'd seen her, she'd been smiling as she'd written something on it. I thought she was taking down my temperature or the names of the drugs I should be given. So, what was this? I couldn't understand. Is she the one who did the first one? Or it wasn't the first one, it was the crucified. Did she do that? Did she? I'd seen it somewhere before. I'd seen this terrible drawing somewhere before. Where? Where had I seen it? My head hurt so bad. The stabbing pain. The prickling at the back of my neck. Don't look at me. I picked up the clipboard. There were several papers there, all medical charts. I flipped through them. Oh my god, are they all the same picture? The second one had the same terrible picture. I flipped to the next. The third one was the same. God. The fourth too. The fifth. The sixth. They all had the same picture on them. This picture. It was crucified. And the seventh was... God. Whose eyes are those? The shipping crate the Takumi Nishijo called home was perched silently on the roof of an old building in Shinsen. I think I need to call it for today. That's all she wrote for me. This is a good place. This is a good little transition, you know? That's the word for it. Alright, that's it. That's all I got. Bye.